My husband and I had been married for about 8 years, and we had gotten along on every aspect of life except for money. There are these relationship dynamics that come into place, and they really aren't about money. They're about this underlying emotional fabric that gets enacted out on the canvas of money.
I find myself talking to couples a lot about how polarity is a tricky thing, because polarity on the one hand is where we grow. It's where attraction is. It's where we can become bigger and better. But also polarity can be divisive and, depending on how we're handling it.
Vagueness, in my opinion and experience, leads to conflict. It's this abstract energy that lives in the space between partners where nobody really knows what's going on, but they just intuit or think that something isn't right there, but you can't put your finger on it.
Okay, hello and welcome. Denise, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here with you and your community.
Great. This is Denise Hughes. Denise Hughes is a money coach based here in the San Francisco Bay Area who works with clients all over the world, and she has both a master's degree in counseling psychology and a certificate in financial counseling. She's frequently quoted in the Wall Street Journal, Financial Advisor magazine, and is on the guest expert panel for Money magazine. Denise's mission is to educate and support individuals and couples in achieving their full financial potential for themselves, for their families, and for generations to come. And Denise is the author of this book, Earn, Save, Spend, Give, 4 Things to Do with Your Money and How to Make It All Work. Denise, this is a book I got, I think around the time it was published, I think 2013. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about financial wellness for parents and common parenting arguments around money and some solutions for what we can do to have a better relationship with money ourselves and to teach our children so that they can have a healthy relationship with money. So Denise, I really appreciate you agreeing to do this, and I'm glad we can find the time.
Yes, me too. Glad to be here.
So just on a personal note, I met Denise when she was recommended, I don't remember who by, because this was a long time ago. This was over 10 years ago. And I went to her personally for some help with getting some budgeting and some financial things in order. And it was so helpful to me that I found myself recommending Denise to friends and to parent coaching clients that I was working with over the years. And when I heard back from those clients, they always had glowing reviews. And so when I started the channel up again and I started doing interviews, you were kind of on my short list of people that I wanted to talk to. And the reason being is, as a parenting coach and as a couples counselor that works exclusively with parents, as people I think know, money is one of the most common arguments. It's one of the most common conflict points for parents. And my experience has been that a lot of times these arguments are not necessary, and they're often just because of our own wounding and our own modeling from our childhood. And what really fascinated me about you, Denise, at first was that you not only had the financial bona fides, and you wrote the book and you read articles that you had done, but also that you had a master's in counseling psychology. And I just thought that was great that you had the mindset also of understanding, what makes people tick and that motivation. What made you motivated to do this work?
That's a good question. So, my own money messes, actually. And my husband and I had been married for about 8 years, and we had gotten along on every aspect of life except for money. And we would argue, and we were on the verge, actually, of talking about divorcing because we could not figure out how to come together with our money situation, and we were opposites. I grew up with a family that was very into saving money. He grew up in a different family system that was more about spending. We had a lot of polarities in our relationship when it came to money, and we didn't know how to talk about money. We only knew how to argue about money and how to
Mm.
distance ourselves from one another. And it really started to affect our relationship. And we actually went into money counseling as well. And I was surprised. I thought, oh my goodness, this isn't that hard. But when you're standing in a blind spot
Hmm.
as an individual or in partnership, it's hard to see where you are. It's hard to know what that blind spot is that you're sitting in is. So we got some help around that, and it took a few months, and our relationship started to switch into a more positive space, which was so helpful. And
Mm.
I thought to myself, if I can go out into the world and help one other couple not to go through the pain that we've been through, this will be worth it. So that's how it all started, just with my own money pain and us talking about divorce and really not wanting to get divorced, but we just couldn't figure things out.
Right. Yeah, it makes me think of a couple of the kind of organizing ideas that I come to counseling with is Carl Jung had a quote that I find myself referring to all the time, that until you make what is unconscious conscious, it directs your life and you call it fate, you know? And I love
Yes.
that. And it applies to so many situations, and it can apply to money. You know, if you have unconscious patterns in what you're calling blind spots, it can really be determining a lot of your actions and you don't even know it, you know? So, what are some of the most common blind spots that you see that people have that come to you?
I think those blind spots are in regard to patterns, unconscious patterns of behavior that people bring to their money life and their partnership. And so some of those patterns can be patterns of avoidance, of
Mm.
neglect, of ignoring, patterns where that we may be using money to numb out, like
Mm.
um, overspending, sometimes compulsive or impulsive shopping, different ways that we're using money that isn't really in maybe our best interest or in alignment with how we would like to be in relationship with money. And so I think that when we are aware of the history and the money scripts and the messages that we have come from our early childhood with, that we enter into partnership and we reenact all of it out on the canvas of partnership. And we're not, and so a lot of times those patterns that we bring are conflicting, not only just in ourselves, conflicting patterns, but also with our partners,
Right. Right. I know for
right?
myself, you know, growing up, my father had a pattern until he passed away a couple years ago. He had a pattern of making a whole bunch of money and then losing it, and then making a whole bunch of money and losing it. And I think I was well into my 20s before I realized I would just spend, spend, spend whenever I had anything, because I just felt like, well, it goes away anyway, so just spend it, you know? And it took me a long time to figure out that that's what I was doing. And obviously, that has a lot of implications, you know?
I wanted to share too, in my own relationship with my husband, one of our money patterns that was a blind spot was that I grew up with messages of there's never enough money. And if there was never enough, you didn't put it on a credit card in my family. You just didn't get what you needed or wanted. And so early on, for me, I lost touch with what I really needed and wanted. And then when I got into marriage, I didn't always verbalize or even know what I needed or wanted in that partnership. And my husband was really good about knowing what he needed or wanted. And so, like, there are these relationship dynamics that come into place, and they really aren't about money. They're about this underlying emotional fabric that
Right.
gets enacted out on the canvas of money. No, thank you for sharing what you did too, because that pattern that you shared, that you then take it forward, right? We take our
Yeah.
patterns forward, and the more that we take our patterns forward, they get like deeper grooves in our brain around them, and our patterns become habits, and those habits become automatic. And before you know it, they're so automatic, we're not even conscious of how we're engaging with our money patterns.
Right. And if both people in a couple, like you're saying, come in with those things, well, then we're kind of doing this unconscious, pinging back and forth with each other with my
Right,
stuff and your stuff, right? What
right,
Sue
right.
Johnson, the marriage therapist, calls the negative cycle. That I'm pinging yours and you're pinging mine, and then we're doing this whole dance, and we don't even know what we're doing sometimes. So it can help to go to a professional, whether it's a marriage counselor or a money advisor, somebody who does what you do, to kind of identify those things and depersonalize them a little bit.
Right, right.
I know you say, I've heard you talk about how we marry our wounded part. I know we're kind of talking about this a little bit, but do you have any examples or stories about that, about how people tend to marry their wounded part?
I think one way that we do that when it comes to money is that often, and research shows this as well, is that we marry our polarity or our opposite. And so, like in my situation, right, I came from a family of savers, that was their value. And so I married a man who really, he wasn't really into savings early on, and he was into adventure and spending. And so I think maybe that was my wounded part, right? The like I was attracted to that because I had lack in that myself growing up. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah, totally.
So right. And vice versa too. He
Right.
married this other part that he experienced that brought him safety or more stability, which he didn't have.
Right. So there, like so many things, there's potential there for
Right.
for learning and change, but there's also, the danger there of the unconscious
Right.
parts, playing themselves out.
I think with
No.
couples, I think that our polarities and our differences, our different views about money are so rich if we give them space in our lives, because it can expand each partner's view, right?
Right.
Because how we
Yeah.
often think about money isn't the right way or the only way. It's just our way. And our
Right.
way isn't so it's just our way, and why not offer in more expansive views or different ways of thinking, and then work on coming together in a conscious way of saying, what is it that we want? What are the parts of our history that we each have that we want to recreate? And what are the parts of our new history that will be new to us, that we weren't taught, but that we want to move forward with, and that we're going to create from our partnership together?
Right. Right.
I think that's a
Exactly.
healthy
Like,
way to,
yeah, no, I exactly agree. I find myself talking to couples a lot about how polarity is a tricky thing, because polarity on the one hand is where we grow. It's where attraction
yes,
is. It's where we can become bigger and better. It's
right,
where, we can evolve. But also polarity can be divisive, and depending on how we're handling it, right? And
right,
so it can be either something which propels us into change and growth, or it can be something where we end up fighting, depending on how we're communicating about it, depending on how conscious we're being about how we're handling it. One of the other concepts I was going to say earlier that I think about a lot from one of my mentors in couples counseling, Stan Tatkin, is he talks a lot about conflict versus deficit in these matters. That if you see your partner as intentionally antagonizing you or making you feel bad or doing something to you, that's more of a conflict model, and it leads to a lot of that negative polarity. But that if you understand that usually these things are about a deficit, a not knowing, I was never taught how to do this with money. I never had this understanding about this, and that's usually what's happening with our partner. Having that model actually can lead to better conversations, or a better stance with each other, if that's clear enough. When people come to you, because my audience is mostly parents, mostly married with children. In case there's a way we can expand on this, what are some of the most common arguments you see? Maybe a couple of the most common arguments you see amongst couples that are married with children, and some kind of sense of a solution or a path that they could take with these conflicts that could lead to growth or lead to change.
Okay. So some of those conflicts, depending, all family situations are different, yet some conflicts are around one of the partners thinking that things cost less than they actually do. So let me give you an example of that. So often I find this, if a woman is staying at home these days with kids and doesn't have like nanny support, often the earner will think, I don't know where's the money going? Why do things cost so much? Because they're busy working and earning and doing their thing, and they're not as connected to camp activities or the cost of groceries going up in the store, things like that. So those kinds of things, like why did you spend so much on this or so much on that? Those are conflicts that come up between couples. Also, conflicts around, well, why aren't we saving more? Or why can't we spend on this vacation? You earn enough, right? Or we earn enough. And so a lot of times couples have this idea that they should be somewhere different in their money life than they are. And it's frustrating. And that frustration leads to conflict or arguments. So it's a little bit of a disconnect. And I think that disconnect often comes because, let's just face it, we live in a world today that is really busy, and I think there's a lot of time scarcity. We don't have enough time to just do normal life. And so a lot of times we are not living in a place of clarity when it comes to our money lives. We're living in more vagueness. We know that money's coming in, but we don't always know like where it's going to or how much is going out, just that it's going out. And then we wonder, well, why aren't we saving enough? And all these other conflicts. And we can't really bring our best strategic frontal lobe decision making to the canvas of money if we're not sitting in clarity around it. Right? Clarity rules. And clarity is where the positive is, the problem solving is, the planning is, the, hey, let's find this solution. Or, oh my goodness, I didn't know that's how much we were spending. And, those kinds of things. Vagueness, in my opinion and experience, leads to conflict. It's this abstract energy that lives in the space between partners where nobody really knows what's going on, but they just intuit or think that something isn't right there, but you can't like put your finger on it. And so when you can't put your finger on it, right, or really look at the clarity of the picture, you can get stuck in that. Partners can get stuck in that place for a long time and just spin, right? And so one of the solutions for parents that I would say is that money is an important relationship in our lives, and it's one of the longest term relationships that we're going to have in our lives, from when we learned that money buys toys or money gets us certain things until, we're on our deathbed, basically. If that is a long-term relationship in our lives, isn't it worthy of our attention? Isn't it worthy that we bring to that relationship what we would bring to any human relationship that we value, which is trying to understand it, trying to be curious about money and our patterns with it? having compassion and kindness, all those things, right? Bringing
Mm-hmm.
our best friend human qualities to that relationship with money, and to
Right.
stop the shame and the judgment and, the negative parts of that. Because I think what I really want parents to realize is this: while it takes time to spend time with examining ourselves with money scripts and our money history and looking at spreadsheets and the numbers, yes, that takes time. But you know what? It takes a lot more of our time and our life force energy when we don't do that, because we can't sleep at night. We go to
Mm.
bed with our head on the pillow, stressing and worrying about money. We
Right.
start to create arguments and stress about money that live in the space between us and our partner. And so, all of that, the not paying attention, not creating intentional time and space, money's going to take up space whether we do it in a positive way or a negative way,
For
right?
sure.
And
Yeah.
and even in my own relationship, I mean, oh my goodness, my husband and I would go on walks before we got into our own financial therapy. I would bring up money all the time, and he would be like, "You're ruining our walks. You're ruining what we're trying to." And it's true, because we didn't give money the attention that it really needed. And it doesn't
Right.
need like a lot of attention. It just needs some, right?
Right. Right. For sure. And yeah, I've always been an advocate for to stop and change a habit and to bring awareness, like you're talking about, to sit and talk to our partner, to maybe involve someone like you for help and guidance with the conversation, or to go to a marriage counselor if things are in conflict enough. That takes time. It takes effort. It takes money sometimes, but it ends up costing less, I think, than those nights where you can't sleep because you're worried so much about being able to save for your children's college or to pay the bills next month. The cost of that, I think, is greater. I want to talk about a couple of different ways that people can bring awareness to their money situation to create better conversations with their partner. And one of them I recall is in your book, the financial assessment tool on page 100. I've referred to this a lot because to me it's something that, even though I feel like this isn't a good place for me, and part of it was talking to you all those years ago, I want to say 2012 or something like that. But I go back to this from time to time. I pull the book off the shelf and I look at the financial assessment tool, and I kind of go over these things and kind of see where things are at. Can you say anything more about, the value of doing something like a personal financial assessment with your partner or individually?
Yeah. Yes, I think it's so helpful because it brings the intangible to tangible. An assessment is a concrete tool, not an abstract tool, right? And so in the assessment, it asks simple things, right? Like, do we plan our spending every month? Or do we open our mail every day? Or do we know each other's credit card scores? And we should know all that about our partners, right? Because financial intimacy is about financial transparency. And
Yeah.
money conversations can start out very sweet and gentle. It could be, let's just share without judgment our credit scores, or let's just share our bank accounts. Let's just begin using soft eyes to look at this together, and to come together around that, because partners are probably, they're starting a family or adding to their family or creating from their union what they want to create in life. And money is
Mm-hmm.
a big piece of that. It's a part, just like health is one of our resources, money is another one of those resources,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we just even look at it that way, like if we take all the emotionality out and look at money as a resource, then how do we come to this and be the best stewards that we can so that we get what we want faster by putting our brains together and figuring it out and sharing these numbers with one another and
Right.
trying to move forward.
And it's never been easier to do that. I know, my partner and I, we get our, alerts, not to endorse any particular company, but like Credit Karma. I've been on Credit Karma for a very long time. And, almost every day it gives me a thing like, hey, good news, your score went up, or, you're in great shape, or you paid off this thing. And not only do I find it like fun and motivating to get those messages when they're good, which, knock on wood. But also it's a thing where maybe we're sitting on the couch and it's like, hey, usually I'll go, hey, look at my score. And she'll go, mine's better, but it's
Right.
it's never been easier to do that. I mean, I remember back not that long ago, it was like writing a letter and getting a report in the mail, and it costs money, or then you get one free a year, and it's just like
Right.
very easy. You also talked, Denise, about how great it can be to have a money date. Can you say more about what a money date is, and how people could go and start trying to have like money dates with their partner?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also have a PDF that I would be more than happy to share with your community
Right.
as a step-by-step how-to.
I'll put the link below so people can download that. Thank you, Denise.
Okay, great. So it would be no different than going on a golf date or a coffee date with one of your friends. It's just that in a human replacement, you're going on a weekly date. I recommend weekly dates with money and no more than maybe 30 minutes
Mm-hmm.
just to get in the groove and the rhythm that you're having a date with money. And so it could be an individual date, even though you're in partnership, where you have a date with money where you're looking at the balances in your accounts, or you're looking at your investment accounts and you're watching the trend of, are they going up, are they going down? Or you maybe are doing a journaling exercise with yourself. A good money date would be to journal the money messages that I learned from my dad were, or the money messages from my mom were, or the most painful memory that I have of money and the best memory that I have of money. So just something. You could do a money date where you're reading an article. It could be anything as long as it is opening the space between you and money. So you could be looking at your accounts, you could be reading, you could be journaling, and then come together as a couple around a money date. So this is what my husband and I did. I love to talk about money, and he's like, oh my God, he's like time limited. So our money dates started out with an egg timer for 15 minutes a week. And there's not a lot you can really dig into for 15 minutes, but we would have one agenda item. And so we would take turns choosing that. And we would talk about it for 15 minutes, and then that was it. And after it, there would be like no commentary. And we had an agreement that it was only during that time of the week for 15 minutes that we would ever talk about money, and money would not leak into any of our conversations the rest of the week. And that really worked. And then we got to like 30 minutes, and we are not beyond 30 minutes. Probably never will be, because it goes beyond his bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. 30 minutes is a long time. That lubrication, that rhythm, that routine, it softened both of us, right? And so now when we come to talk about money, which is way more than once a week, it's easy. It just feels like, it kind of has that feel of like, hey, what are we going to have for dinner tonight?
Right.
Versus,
You've exercised
versus
that muscle.
Right, versus an emotional charge to it, right? So a money date is basically a time and space that an individual or a couple comes to their relationship with money and is working on strengthening and improving that relationship to make it feel that it feels good to the heart and soul.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's so, I love the way you described it, because I know in couples counseling, for instance, one of the issues that comes up a lot is when you're not taking time to talk about important things like money, then you try to sneak out and have that one date a week and just have some fun and get away.
Right.
And then one of the partners is so stressed out about something like money that they bring it up, and then the other one's upset because they just wanted to have fun. It's not necessarily that they don't want to talk about anything serious, it's just they haven't had a chance to be not serious. And so it ends up being a conflict between the two of them. And so if you set aside time to, even the egg timer, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, depending on what's going on, then at least you've got it done. You've got it out of your system. You know that it's been addressed. And so it doesn't become so urgent when you're just trying to go out and have a nice dinner, together, or, see a movie. I really appreciate all this, Denise. One of the things I wanted to ask you before we wrap up for today, and I'm sure we could talk a lot more about so many things, and maybe we'll do it again in the future, depending on questions people have and things. But one of the reasons for creating transformative parenting, one of the parts of the mission is let's help prepare and equip our children with the tools that they need to thrive in life, to have good lives, not perfect lives. That doesn't exist. There's no lack of tension like we talked about, because sometimes we need that to grow and expand, but to at least be equipped and not have as many deficits maybe as we had. And I think that includes relationship with money, like you're talking about, or, their relationship with the energy of money and about spending and about saving. And so what do you think are some of the top things that we should keep in mind in teaching our children and helping our children to develop a good, healthy relationship with money before they head out into the world as much as possible?
So that relationship can start at the age of being a toddler. Okay. And I'm going to share some resources with you. There is a website called parenting.com. I will also send you the link. And they have a concrete, age appropriate type of developmental task, if you will, in what children of all ages through 18 can do and learn around money, and what parents can do to help support them. So from an early age, right, parents can even just get kids used to money, like naming the coins and being concrete about it. One of the things I want to say is it's so different than when I grew up, where people carried money in their wallet, or you could
Right.
hear coins jiggle in the pocket, and now money moves through computers. And so parents need to realize that the way that kids learn, that we all learn actually, is through bringing a sensory experience to what we are engaging with. And so the touching of coins, the touching and feeling of money, creating savings jars in the home with maybe a picture of what your child wants, and then how you help them to fill that with money and teach that this thing they want costs this, and this is how much money, and this is how much more needs to be saved. So like in concrete ways, right, that we can do that. And then when you have an adolescent in your home, budgeting could be taught, like how much does it cost to go out with your friends every month or every week, or how much does it cost for school lunches if they do that anymore, or just like if you clothing, right? So a lot of times parents will give X amount of dollars per week or per month, and then their adolescent manages that, and if they run out, there will have to be some problem solving around that. And that's all good, because we aren't perfect, and it's our way to like begin to learn and open up more conversations with our kids, right? So
Right.
age appropriate money activities are really important, and that isn't something, at least in my generation, that was taught. We were
Right.
never given an allowance, or anyway. So the other thing is, besides my book, I want to tell you another book that I love, and it's called Couples and Money, and it is
Oh,
by
okay.
Victoria Collins. It's an old book, but in all my coaching, I've used this book as a Bible, kind of, for couples and myself. And one of the things I want to read, two things that she talks about, because she
Great.
talks about how usually by the age of 12, our nervous system has internalized money messages so in our environment to the point where then
Mm,
when we grow up we just go out and reenact all the messages that we've been given. And she says that when it comes to spheres of money influence, parents need to realize that what influences children or how they were treated in their family regarding money and how they watched one another regarding money. So, however, the parents react to one another or conversations or lack thereof, kids pick it up. They pick
mm,
up all the nonverbals and then create these beliefs inside of themselves based on what they're watching and also
right.
their own internal experience, right?
Right.
So I think a big thing for parents is, you know, just start to be aware of your own patterning and what you are role modeling to your kids,
Hmm.
and be aware of that so that you are coming from a positive space and not a negative space, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the age appropriate activities. And I think being aware that you want to create an environment where your child can come to you about anything and ask questions, not just with money. I mean, anything, right? But you create that environment of like, well, let's be curious. Well, let's
Yeah.
understand. And that is such a gentle, non stressful way to begin a relationship with money that then kids can carry forward into their adult life.
Right. As you were talking, a personal example came up before we close here today. It was really right around the time that I spoke to you again, like 2012 area. So my son was probably 8 or 9 years old, and it's one of the saddest memories for me as a father to recall my own behavior. There was a day that was particularly stressful. It's a long story, but I had really set up this big work thing that was going to take many months, and it was a contract, and it all fell through because of some funding issues. And I was upset and I was stressed and I was thinking of all the different things I had to pay for in his private school and all this. And in the midst of that, his mother asked me if she said she was tired and can she go out. Not like she had to ask me permission, but she's like, I was thinking about going out and getting some takeout for lunch. I think she just felt guilty about it or something. And I said, yeah, of course, go for it. And I went into the kitchen a little while later to get some of the leftovers, and I saw the bill, which was really high. It was much higher than I expected for lunch. And I had a little temper tantrum for a few seconds. I don't remember what I said, but I was like, what in the $50 or whatever it was. I quickly felt bad. I quickly apologized to her. Our son, I was aware, was in the other room. And I apologized to her and I said, I'm so sorry. I'm just stressed about money. And she and I fixed it in the moment and she understood. And luckily I had the awareness. But then a few days later, I said something about going out to eat. And my son went, yeah, no, we shouldn't. And in that moment, I realized it was because daddy had a temper tantrum, because daddy got mad. It was just obvious to me in that moment. And I thought in that moment, like, one, I was kind of being my dad a little bit. And two, that really easily, if I didn't repair it with my son and explain it, which I did, could have been a patterning for him. That could have been in his nervous
Yes.
system. Does that make
Right.
sense? And it made,
Yes.
I felt bad, but for a couple weeks, all I did was I just paid attention. Is he all of a sudden having a reaction like that? Is he all of a sudden, and we talked about it. And I said, Daddy got really upset there. That had nothing to do with anything but my stress. And I feel bad about that. And we, of course, can go out and enjoy it. And I hope
Right.
I handled it well, but it was so heavy to me because in that moment I realized, wow, that was some patterning, inside of
Right.
me. I really appreciate all the resources. I didn't know about the parenting.com tool. I will link that below, about conversations to have with your child that are developmentally appropriate for their age. I didn't know about the
Right.
Couples and Money book. Is that what it was called? And I'll put a link to
Yes.
that below. And I will also encourage everyone. This is a really easy read. It's still available
Yeah.
on Amazon. Earn, Save, Spend, Give. It's a
Yeah.
really great resource, including all the tools in it about like the financial fitness tool. And I will put a link, Denise, to your website, which has a great blog, and also to the handout that you mentioned about having a money date
Right.
and how to have a money date with your partner below. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time. Like I said, I wanted to have you on for a bit, so I'm glad our schedules aligned. And thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you for the invitation. It was just so fun to reconnect and be with you, and I hope this helps your community in amazing ways.
I hope so too. And please leave your comments and questions below, and any questions that you have for Denise. And if I get a question enough, I will definitely, if with your permission, Denise, maybe pass it on, and maybe we'll do another interview sometime with some follow-ups.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Todd.
Thanks again, Denise.